there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting dodo birds. Leaky Black Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to the like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you're not yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, please, if you're on YouTube right now, knock that out while you're here. Let's get into it. You might have heard it's a big week in college athletics, and that's because it's settlement week in the House versus NCAA class action lawsuit that is expected to reshape the college sports business model. The settlement, if approved, and we seem on our way to getting this thing approved, it's going to cost nearly $3 billion in damages. That's a lot of money, sure, especially to folks like us, but it's probably 6 or 7 times less than what the damages would be if the NCAA went to court and lost. And considering the NCAA basically always loses in court, the smart thing to do probably is to settle. So a settlement is coming, and that settlement will also include a new system in which roughly $20 million per year can be distributed directly from a power conference school to an athlete. Norlander, that's the long and short of it. I think 2 questions for you. One, what can you add? And 2, how big of a deal is all of this for folks who maybe haven't been following it so closely?
Yeah, and on that note, happy Wednesday to everyone listening. And we'll get to some college hoop stuff specifically on the back half of the show, but we are kind of slow on the college hoops news front. This is a major college sports story, and we haven't talked a ton about it on the show, but frankly, we know we've got a large audience that is interested in this stuff, so why not at least talk about it and keep folks up to date if you're kind of on the outskirts and have been paying attention, because this is a humongous story with serious, long-term, decades-long impacts on how college sports actually operates, and may or may not lead to certain separations, defined or broadly acknowledged within the scope of Division I athletics. So, if you've heard the term House case, this all started in 2020 because there was an Arizona State swimmer named Grant House who basically teamed up with some powerful lawyers, Jeffrey Kessler, the big name one, saying the NCAA was illegally limiting NIL potential of college athletes across the country, and in doing so was in violation of antitrust laws, and in prohibiting compensation models, was flagrantly running afoul of what should be, fair and proper. So that is the big case. There's a couple of other cases that are also happening that are expected to be settled that are probably going to get looped into this, but we're going to just keep a narrow focus on this with the House case because it's the biggest one with the most money. And as GP just laid out, they're going to settle because otherwise, as it's been laid out to me by a few folks, if the NCAA opted not to settle and to fight this in court, probably would lose. But not only that, it would be exponentially more money. And the day you lose in court, the money is owed immediately. And so this is the proper thing to do here. Now, it has come with some controversy. So I guess I'll lay out a few things. And I am interested on GP's thoughts on all this stuff. So earlier this week, the D1 Board of Directors, they've voted to approve this settlement. And the money will get paid out by the NCAA to a certain extent, and then all the other conferences, and that's where a lot of the disagreement comes from, and we can touch on that as well. The Board of Governors, which is above the Board of Directors, the Board of Governors is a group of presidents at the NCAA level, still has to technically approve this, and that is expected to go down either later today on Wednesday, if not on Thursday, so that this can activate later on during the 2024 year. The fight with this, and this has been interesting in the past few days here because it has been a late stage development, is how all of this money, this $2.77 billion worth of damages, winds up getting paid out. Because the interesting detail in the case is that the entities named in the case by House are the NCAA, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, yes, the Pac-12 is still technically fighting this, even though the league's about to dissolve, and the SEC. Those are the defendants in the case. But it's not just because they're the defendants in the case that means they're the only ones on the hook for all this money. The NCAA isn't, so all the conferences are going to have to pay out. And this is based on 2 factors here. It's everything from 2016 to 2022. And eventually, why 2016? Because that was determined to be the cutoff. Because at a certain point, are we going back to 1998 and saying Keith Van Horn lost out on NIL opportunities, et cetera? Like, we're going back to Kareem. We're going back to George Mikan. They had a cutoff. The judge decided 2016 was the cutoff. 2022 was when NIL was formally legalized. And so that's the period here. There's that. So there's essentially back pay. And then there is the process moving forward, which GP mentioned off the top, wherein schools, Power Conference in particular, as terms of the settlement, they have to opt in on this plan where they will commit somewhere around $20 million annually. Again, schools, not leagues. Each school at the Power 5 level will have to opt in at about $20 million. Now, the smaller conferences don't have to do that moving forward because, frankly, they can't afford to do it. However, the 27 conferences that aren't in the Power 5, or what was the Power 5, the Pac-12 still exists in this weird world we're in right now. They're still on the hook for a lot of money, like $990 million worth of money. And there's been a big fight, a fight that ultimately these conferences have effectively lost here because the Power Conference schools obviously stand to make so much more money. Now they're going to be paying more, but still the money that that's going to come in is going to be substantially more. And yet your NECs, your Southlands, your Big Wests, your Big Skies, even your Big East, and we can get to Val Ackerman, they are on the hook to pay a ton of money. In fact, the Big East is getting in part screwed because a lot of the function of how this stuff gets paid out is based on your NCAA tournament units. So the people that did all this work behind the scenes, Parrish, that did all the math, a lot of it was based on NCAA payouts. So, for example, the SEC is set to become, ultra rich because of its media rights deals. But guess what? The ACC has had more NCAA tournament success over the past, X amount of years. And so because of that, in this case, the ACC, which isn't nearly as loaded as the SEC, is going to wind up paying more money in this case than the SEC. The Big East, with all of its success, is going to wind up, this is per Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports who reported this, the Big East will be, quote, responsible for about $5 million to $7 million annually, or as much as $70 million over the next decade, a figure that works out to $600,000 to $700,000 per school per year. That's a substantial amount of money for an athletic department that does not carry football. So with all of this, all these conference commissioners, they were fighting back on this, saying the model is wrong. You've got the non-football schools, the non-power schools paying 60% of what's left over that's not getting paid by the NCAA, and the big school is only paying 40%. Let's flip that because they have the money and means, but ultimately those conference commissioners don't have the power. And while it was considered, ultimately they said, nope, we're gonna stick to what it is, and you're gonna pay this, despite the fact that about 94% of this back pay is from 2016 to 2022. It's going to go to former men's basketball players and football players who lost out on NIL opportunities. That's everyone from your Zion Williamsons to your Joe Burrows to the fifth guy off the bench on a ninth place A-10 team. So how that gets split up is still to be determined. It's a huge week in college sports. I don't agree whatsoever with the payment structure here. I think it is GP, with every evolution of college sports that I think has been needed and overdue. We continue to see the splitting of those in power versus those in not, the haves versus the have-nots. It doesn't mean that D1 won't continue to exist with 360 teams, but it does set up where you are just, the resource allotments between these programs is going to continue to get further and further spread apart. And I think that does have kind of profound long-term impacts on the sport overall. And I think one important note about all these payments, it's basically going to be like having your wages garnished. So the NCAA is simply going to withhold money through the NCAA tournament and its men's media rights deals and other factors that would have otherwise been paid out to these conferences and these schools. That's just simply not going to be there in the years to come. So the schools will have to operate their athletic departments through other means. And I think it will lead to the cutting of a number of scholarship sports, which sucks for college athletics overall. But yeah, this is huge. And as one conference commissioner told me on Tuesday, this is devastation without representation, because essentially, if you aren't a power conference school that has football, these money-making decisions were made without your consent, consultation whatsoever. And you are going to see mid-major leagues across the country get slashed even further. And what stings the most, and then it's back to you, GP. I know I'm really trying to lay out a ton here, is that the money that's being paid out here, the CFP money that these power conferences are going to make in the years to come, and the billions upon billions that's going to be spread across, none of that money is being touched by what we have here. None of it. And so it's particularly stinging for the mid-major conferences, because the thought there is, look at the reality of what college sports is, read the room. You're going to be able to afford to pay this, and the fact that you're keeping us on the hook for a bigger portion of the bill than is truly fair was not cool. In addition to them kind of deciding this in the shadows, and then only letting these conference commissioners truly have an idea of what the breakdown was going to be earlier this month.
Yeah, a lot of stuff there. I guess I'd start by saying the mid majors and the low majors have always operated from a disadvantaged place, and they will continue to do so, perhaps more dramatically, but that's not something that keeps me up at night. Like, I know people love to talk about a balanced playing field and all that stuff, but it's never actually existed. We have forever had a system where if you're a great mid-major athletic director, you leave that place. If you're a great mid-major coach, you leave that place for a high major, with few exceptions. I recognize there are some coaches who have never left when they could have, but largely that's the way the system works. Now we have a system where yes, the money will be more dramatically different at different levels of the sport, and that'll lead to players jumping to the high major level from the mid-major level. It'll lead to the mid-majors and low majors having a difficult time keeping their best players. But, that's always sort of been the way it is. It'll just be more dramatic now. Yeah. I don't mind that. The settlement number, listen, this is pretty simple to me. If I've got smart lawyers telling me we could settle right now for a little less than $3 billion, or we can go to court. We go to court. If we lose, it might be $20 billion. And we usually, I don't know if you've been following the news, but we usually lose in court. So maybe it's time to.
That's a huge number, by the way. I saw a couple of like NIL folks in the space who tweet a lot. I'm not GP. It might be 20 billion, but there are people that are offering skepticism over the size of that number. But even still, if it was $6 billion and you had to pay it immediately, this is now almost $3 billion spread out over a decade. It's quite clearly the prudent move.
Yeah, like I'm not going to pretend to know the exact number, what it would be if they were to go to court and lose, but I have seen reputable reporters, people you and I respect, put the number at $20 billion. Imagine you're charged with a felony and they got you. I mean, buddy, you ain't beating this one because you never beat these types of charges. And they say you want to do 3 years in prison or possibly do 20. Yeah, just let's do the 3 and get done with this. So I have no issue with the settlement. It seems like the smart play. My biggest issue moving forward is the part about future revenue distribution to the student athletes, because again, it is the number out there is put at roughly 20 million annually. Power conferences are going to be permitted to distribute to athletes. Yeah. And I know that sounds like a lot because it's 20 million more than we used to have. I'm not sure that's a fair number still. And so I don't know why that is the place. I don't know how we got to a point where people say that's the number it should be, because, in the NBA, players get roughly 50% of revenue. And in the NFL, it's roughly, I think it's a little less, but it's 48% maybe, something right around there. I'm not sure. Like the Big Ten just distributed $60 million to its members in 2023. The tax records just came back on that document. I don't have my calculator in front of me, but I don't think 20 million is 50% of 60 million. And that 60 million doesn't even include like ticket sales and merchandising and all of that stuff that also contributes to athletic department revenue. So, I'm happy that student athletes are now going to be able to take money directly from schools, but I'm still not sure they're getting a fair deal. For instance, I saw Penny Hardaway talking about this on a podcast with Evan Turner and Audrey Iguodala, and he was talking about where we are with NIL right now. And he was like, "Do you realize like some of my players now are making more money than some of my assistant coaches?"
Yep.
And they say that like it's like, can you believe it? And I actually think the opposite is true. Like, can I believe that star players make more than assistant coaches? Yeah, that's the way it works in every other sport. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes makes more than the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator, and nobody thinks that's crazy. So why would we think it's crazy that Hunter Dickinson might make more than a Kansas assistant coach? He should. And so I just think we're still having such a hard time wrapping our head around these numbers because it's all so new, but I'm still not sure the numbers are actually where they should be.
I think that's fair. Again, a huge issue with so many so many things still to be decided. It'll never get to the point where the NCAA is operating like the pro leagues, in part because you have so many college athletes in so many different sports and so many different disciplines that you're just never going to be able to. And speaking to people that are in the space and dedicate a lot more time to it than I do, you're never going to get tens of thousands of student athletes to collectively bargain, particularly when there are thousands entering that would be union annually and thousands leaving it because they're entering college and graduating college and all of that. So it is a good start. There could be more. This doesn't prevent future antitrust violations. Obviously, it's also going to be
so then that's where we're going to end up eventually.
Maybe yes, maybe no. And speaking to some folks, there is a tangible material movement here to having. This is going to lead to universities paying their players. Okay, that's the big step here. You are going to have colleges paying their student athletes while they are, attending school and enrolled in classes and all that. That's you can go back literally 3 months and see conference commissioners and athletic directors on the record speaking about how they don't want that to happen and don't believe it'll be in the near future. Well, they were wrong, and it's going to happen there. So that is a major step forward. And also the costs and logistics of running an athletic department in a program are not the same as running a 32-team professional franchise and all the things that come with it. So, and I know you know this, GP. I'm just saying it for our listeners. They're not A to A. So you're not going to have a model from a revenue generating and distribution standpoint that's going to match professional leagues because the mechanisms that run college sports don't line up exactly the same way. But I would agree with you. It's still not enough. Even with that, though, as was pointed out to me by two different people earlier this week, you are still going to have, the problem with the big power conferences and the smaller mid majors. That's a huge one for sure. But you're going to have that within the power conferences as well, because you will have schools like, Wake Forest or Mississippi State, although they're in the SEC, but Iowa State, like there are going to be schools in the ACC and the Big 12 that are in the bottom third of those conferences that still have major financial problems long-term, but they'll have to opt in on paying this much money. And they're going to, within their own leagues, continually be tripping over their shoelaces, running in the rat race there. And they don't have a choice but to opt in. The schools outside the Power 5 conference, I want to be clear on this. They don't have to opt in. As terms of the settlement here, they don't have to say, because they can't afford it. They literally cannot afford to pay their student athletes $5 million out of the school coffers, let alone $20 million. They don't have the media rights deals to justify it. But within that framework and that structure, you will have, further separation between the sides there. And what will be interesting from a college basketball standpoint in talking to one conference commissioner is if you're the Big East, how much do you opt in? What's your number? Is it 20 million? You have major men's and women's basketball players here. What does the A10 do? Does the A10 opt in for 2 million collectively across its schools there? That's going to be interesting because the SECs, the Big 10s, the Big 12s, they will and want to opt into this cap because then a competitive market will breed a competitive market, and that's going to be part of it. When you break it down by player, that's still to be determined, but you could see, a softball player, the starting third baseman on, a fifth place SEC team getting $12,000 from their school. It's more than they were getting before. And how much value does, the eighth most important player on a men's lacrosse team really bring to a school? It's nothing, but the they're going to get paid, and many people would argue that should be the case there. It is pretty fascinating to see how swiftly this is changing, because the case coming to a settlement at this pace, I think is highly refreshing, even if the terms and how they got there were controversial behind the scenes. Just so we have the math correct here, so people really understand who's getting paid out and by what. The NCAA office in general is going to pay 41% of this. This is per Dellinger's reporting here, although Commissioner backed this up with me earlier this week. So the NCAA will take care of 41% of the bill over the next 10 years. Then the Power 5 conferences will pay 24%. The G5 schools, which have football, your Americans, your Mountain Wests, those they'll pay 10%. All their FCS programs with football with 13%, and then school conferences that don't have football period will have 12% there. And for $2.77 billion over a 6-7 year period, like the number is actually pretty high. My big question with this is it's such a big number, and they finally settle, having this precedent on the books with a settlement. And then there's two other cases that are out there that might even get folded into this. So the math could even adjust here, folks, in the next couple of weeks. Does this prevent any future antitrust lawsuits coming forward for even more money until we have athletes collectively bargain? There's a lot of skepticism they'll ever do that, because even you follow, and GP, this in particularly the NBA, but MLB, NFL, these CBAs between players unions and leagues, like they're constantly tenuous agreements, and there's high tensions, and there's drag down fights over terms, over this, that, and we've had lockouts, we've had strikes, but because the entities, the governing bodies, and the representation with the unions are relatively small, those things, while sometimes they drag on for weeks and months, eventually do get settled. Skepticism is just sky high over the idea that college athletics will ever truly have a true union. Now, there are still efforts to try and make that happen, but in absence of that, is the NCAA permanently and forever in a vulnerable spot to further litigation? Some folks have expressed to me not nearly as much now because of the seismic nature of this settlement and this case, and when you will have schools paying out and using real means and schools losing money because of it. We wait and see on it, but this is overdue. I would say the players are still entitled to more, particularly in the power conferences where this CFP money is going to start coming in by the billions, and the calculus on this, I would say specifically at those schools, your Missouri Valleys and your Max and and those schools, I would say, they've paid their penance here, but your SECs, Big Tens, ACCs, Big 12s, you want to consolidate, you want to expand your leagues, you want to create a CFP, you want to try and box out and create the new rules on all these tournaments and these revenue models, then you should be at risk for paying even more. And frankly, you should, considering billions of dollars that are going to be coming into those conferences over the next X amount of years. Because as a reminder, the CFP is not run by the NCAA. It's not governed by the NCAA. That is a postseason tournament format that is completely run by the conferences, and the commissioners of those leagues hold all the power.
I want to circle back to something you said, and then we can move on. I mentioned NBA players get 50% of basketball-related income. NFL players, I believe it's around 48%. And you made the point, I don't want to misquote you, that it's not, A to A because of, how much money it costs to run an athletic department. Just restate that, so I don't want to misquote you.
Well, just, everything that comes with running an athletic department, programs, the number of people you employ, the buildings you got to keep the lights on, the number of different venues, you'll have schools that'll have, instead of just having the Memphis Grizzlies, you have 14 scholarship sports. So that's basically the point I was making, and why it's to split it, 50-50 that way. There are so many more resources that need to be allocated at the college level than the pro level, that getting to a 50-50 split does not seem like
I guess my point would be, if I were the players, I would say I don't care about any of that. And by the way, none of you, including us, know what it actually costs to run an athletic department. You want to know why? They've been spending money like crazy for decades so that at the end of it, they could say, hey, we don't really have any money for the players. Well, it's because you spend all the money.
Oh, I agree with that entirely. I mean, It was an arms race forever. Take your point, GP. But it was arms race forever, all these huge facilities, and that's how they were doing because they weren't paying. One of the greatest ironies in sports for decades, Parrish, as you well know, is you went to a college facility and you went to a pro facility, and you'd be wowed by how much better the college facility was because all the money was going in there. Why is that? Because the pro facilities were obviously putting the money where it should be with the players.
Yeah, I guess I would just say if I'm the players and we're moving forward, I'm saying, okay, you're telling me it cost all this money to run an athletic department, but I'm looking at your staff directory and you have 40 associate athletic directors. Do you really need 40 associate athletic directors? Because you're telling me that's what it costs to run an athletic department. I'm arguing you don't really need all those people. Oh, yeah. We don't have more money than this because, we have to give our football coach $10 million a year. Well, do you need to give your football coach $10 million a year? Like, I know you did because you had more money than you knew what to do with, and everybody did at the high major level. So you didn't have to pay players. So you just paying football coaches and basketball coaches, whatever their agents asked for. But is that really necessary? Why are we living in a world where a coach makes, in most cases, 10 times what a player makes? The coach is still making in college athletics, in some cases, 10 times what the star player is making. That's not the way sports big business sports works. There ain't coaches in the NBA making 10 times what the best players are making. There ain't coaches in the NFL making 10 times what the best players are making. They ain't coaches anywhere except for college athletics. So I would just argue that it's still nowhere close to fair. And if the counter argument to that is, but you have no idea how much it costs to run an athletic department, I would say, okay, well, let's look at it. Let's get professional people to look at it, because I think you're spending more money running an athletic department than you probably need to.
Yeah, with that, you would potentially have the loss, and this would be a genuine downer, obviously, but if and when we get there, I think you'll actually see this, unfortunately, coming soon. As a cost-cutting measure, you'll just have schools get rid of sports. You're going to have a school that might have 14 scholarship sports bumped down to 10, one that might have 20 bumped down to 16 or 14, which means, lost opportunities, obviously, for young men and women across the country to continue their education while doing something they really, really love, playing sports, whatever sports that might be. But getting there, I don't disagree, Parrish, but getting there and trying to balance the books might involve firing coaching staffs and trainers associated with those sports, in addition to not having scholarships and, getting thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars off the books there. So we'll see. I mean, this is a major, major, major week in sports, which is why we spent a half hour opening a pod on this topic here. But the story isn't done. The fallout from this and kind of the reverberation across college sports and how these decisions, and again, the real, a lot of these conference commissioners are pretty pissed over the way that this is getting decided. I think it could have impacts down the road with other things that matter, but we'll cross those bridges when we get there.
Yeah, let's move on to some basketball stuff. I've updated the top 25 and one now, I believe, maybe 23 times. And every time I do it, I get interesting responses. The way this stuff usually works is people are very upset that I have their team, their favorite school, in some cases their alma mater, underrated. But not these North Carolina fans. Okay. They get mad at me because they think I have the Tar Heels too high. It's a weird situation. We'll talk about that next. But first, let's do a word from our partners.
Well, you need your sports news anywhere.
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
And I love that CBS Sports HQ spot, but
What's up, Anderson Cooper?
But I do miss Anderson Cooper, and I wouldn't mind seeing Knuckles. I wouldn't mind seeing Knuckles on a Wednesday morning. So I have North Carolina ranked third in the top 25 and one. And North Carolina fans every day tell me I'm crazy. Am I crazy? Is that too high?
All right. So to be clear, I haven't gone about thinking about ranking the teams yet. I try and save that for deeper into the off season. Can you recap, if you can remember, the journey UNC has gone on here? You've always had RJ Davis projected to return. So have they been 3, 4, and 5 since the day after the title game?
They've been around in that range the entire time. At one point, I had Harrison Ingram projected back. Now I have him gone, but they did add Cade Tyson, the transfer from Belmont. That's a guy who averaged 16.2 points per game this past season for your Bruins. Shot 46.5% from three. So, yeah, like I'm not saying it's a even swap, but like they added somebody. They added a real player through the transfer portal. They bring back Elliot Cadeau. He's going to be a sophomore who started. I know people don't love him. He did start 31 games as a freshman for a team that was a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. RJ Davis might be the preseason national player of the year. So there's your 2 starting guards. All right.
Yep.
Ian Jackson's a top 10 player in the class of 2024. We used to get excited about those guys,
Well, and he might be a player. By the way, Nada, can we put up a poll real quick from now to the end of the show? UNC should be 1-5, 6-10, 11-15, or 16 or lower. Let's see what the audience has here. But it continue. Ian Jackson. Who else we got?
Okay, so then you got Ian Jackson, Cade Tyson there. There's some thought that even Cade could slide over to the 4. I'll let Hubert Davis figure out his rotations. But
actually, I think you should be consulting him on his rotations.
I will consult. I will make North Carolina's lineup.
You got North Carolina ranked higher than Hubert Davis, so I think maybe you should be.
I probably do. And so 1, 2, 3. I'm excited about that. You get some questions, I can admit, at the 4-5. If you're going Jalen Withers, he's a fifth year player, averaged 12 minutes per game this past season for a team again that was a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. He's a 4-star recruit in the class of 2019. Initially signed with Louisville, so not the most productive player, but he was in the rotation for a 1 seed last season. And then Jalen Washington's a 3rd-year player. Only played 8.4 minutes per game last season for a 1 seed. But here's the deal with him, because people are like, they got nothing in the front court. Well, they have nothing in the front court because you ain't really seen it that much, because they had Armando Bacot in the front court for the past 4 decades. All right. So when you have Bacot eating up all those minutes and those rebounds, it's hard for anybody else to get much production or even minutes in the front court. I'm not saying that, the breakthrough player of the year in college basketball resides in Chapel Hill, but I'm not as troubled by the front court as some North Carolina fans seem to be. I just look at that and I say, sure, I think Kansas should be ahead of them, and I got Houston ahead of them. And there's a scenario where Mark Sears announces he's coming back to school, and I'll get Alabama ahead of him too. But I genuinely don't think it's crazy to have North Carolina in the top 5. But I am struck by how crazy some North Carolina fans seem to believe that it is.
I gotta check my driveway real quick here. Can you give our vamp for 15 seconds? Can you give a couple more examples here to our audience about what kind of responses and why you think Carolina fans have such a huge issue with where you've been ranking them?
It's all the front court. It's always we don't even have anybody who plays in the front court. And I'm like, but you do. You don't have Armando Bacot back or anybody as established and proven as that. But you do have people who play in the front court, and I suspect they'll be better than you think. God, I hope so.
No, I hope so as well. Apologies. Did you hear the truck backing up or no? Did you hear the beep beeps? That's
I never heard a truck.
Okay, I muted my mic there for a second there. We finally are repairing. Finally, we're gonna do it in 2020. Then you might have heard we had a pandemic. We've waited 4 years to finally repair our deck, and of course, this was supposed to get dropped off yesterday, and then this huge. And now my dog is barking right when we're podcasting. Incredible. All right, Carolina. I think some of the issue is that they want another big man in the portal. They want to get another person that is a real impact player, and maybe Carolina is going to get that. I know they're still trying to recruit Ugonna Onyenso from Kentucky, who would be a good piece, 7-footer. And maybe he's a Tar Heel. If not, if Coleman Hawkins doesn't go pro, which feels 50-50-ish, Coleman Hawkins is considering Carolina along with a handful of other schools. I think Arkansas is in there. Louisville was in there. So maybe you get if you get Hawkins or Onyenso, then forget about it. I think Carolina fans would be with you on that, but they don't have them at the timing of this podcast. So we'll just operate. They don't have those pieces just yet. And which is where does Carolina register fairly as a top 5 team with the roster that it currently has? I think it's probably pretty close, although I'll bring up a freshman that I think Drake Powell is going to be. I saw him multiple times as a recruit. Ian Jackson's like he's slightly more highly rated, and he'll thrive with the ball in his hands. I'm interested to see how Ian Jackson learns from RJ Davis and how those guys play in tandem. I think that's going to be really exciting. I think Elliot Cadeau, I think he will blossom into a wonderful second-year player. I'm very, very in on him and the Jalen's, Washington and Withers. I just like the pieces, and I think Powell will be a plug-and-play role player that is going to be a very positive, productive freshman on a Carolina team that's obviously going to be loaded with veteran play. So I side with you, Parrish, on this. I mean, to expect RJ Davis to have a repeat first-team All-American type season might be asking to clear too high of a bar. Oh, I only say that because he's someone who was not going to get a real look at being drafted. And he's a smaller guard. He's going to have a lot of talent around him. And I think he's going to willingly share the sugar for the benefit of his teammates. And, Cade Tyson, who was a 16-point-a-game guy at Belmont, I think he'll be an impact player there. So I still think RJ Davis has a great shot at being an All-American. Don't get me wrong here. Well, he was a top 4 player of impact last season. Will he be that again? I'm not convinced, but I do think that he'll be the most important player on this Carolina team, and him repeating another really, really, really good season will give UNC a great chance at being a top 2 team in the ACC. Whether it's UNC or Duke remains up for debate. I can't wait to see how that plays out, but it is fascinating to see how UNC fans push back on this. I personally think that a lot of it has to do with not having that final transfer bid because they've been waiting on it. They lost out on a few other guys. They were in there on Jonas Adu, who ultimately went to Arkansas with a few others there. Do they get Onyenso? Do they get Hawkins? Those are 2 very different players. You could argue with who they have on the roster already that Onyenso would be the better piece. I'd actually buy that. Hawkins is the better player, but Onyenso probably gives you more to round out the roster. Again, we'll have to see if they get either of those guys. If they do, even the most cynical of Carolina fans, and I don't know why they're veering into this territory. By the way, this feels outside their typical disposition there. You couldn't fight back on the fact that UNC would be a preseason top 5 team with one more key addition. The question is, do they get it? And will we have it in the next 24, 48, 72 hours? So if it's Hawkins, you won't get that. Hawkins is taking it to the end of the deadline there. On Yenso, I think I would expect you'd have a decision either way on where he's going by, I don't know, next Monday or Tuesday at the latest. So, yeah.
Now I've got myself in a situation where I got to spend all this year rooting for North Carolina just for me. Now I'm emotionally invested in the Tar Heels. I might trade in my Boilermaker card and become a Tar Heel. I might be a Tar Heel next season. In addition of, obviously, needless to say, in addition to being a Sun Devil.
Yeah. I know you have a couple of those every single year, and then obviously you root against Marquette, as people know that's been long established on the pod. A couple of folks in the chat are saying that they don't think Carolina has depth. I would disagree. I think Davis, Cadeau, Trimble, Withers, Washington, Tyson, Jackson, Powell all get serious minutes. And in addition to, we'll see if Zayden High winds up being an impact player or not. But yeah, they lose Ingram, they lose Baycott. Those are big losses. Cormac Ryan obviously had a couple of huge moments there, but I think the roster it's close to what it was last year. Last season's team was a 1 seed. If you had me guess right now, will UNC be a 1 seed in 25? I'd say no, but I like their chances to be a 2. I take them to have a better chance as a 2 seed than say a 4 seed for sure. I'd lean more in on that. Questions will Davis be able to replicate much of his senior season? And then will Jackson and Powell combined to be the best 1-2 freshman punch in the country, not at Duke? I think they've got a good chance. I'm way in on Powell. Jackson's really good. I think Powell will be a more valuable player for Carolina next season, even if his role will be different from what Jackson is.
I don't know that they're the deepest team in the country, but they have enough depth. I mean, how many you really need? They're going to have a 5-star top 15 prospect coming off their bench. Right. I mean, I'm a believer. I'm a Tar Heel. You ever been to the Dean Smith Center and they got that video they play? They got that video they play.
Yeah, I'm a Tar Heel. Yeah.
Everybody's like, it's like James Worthy. He's like, I'm a Tar Heel.
Yeah.
And then it's like Larry Brown. I'm a Tar Heel. And then it's like Michael Jordan.
He's the last one.
What if I can get in that video?
You can't.
They can put me in there.
Yeah, they won't. I assure you, they will not.
Fast forward to the first Duke Carolina game of the season. North Carolina's ranked number 1 in the country, and it goes straight from Tyler Hansborough to me. Tyler Hansborough says, I'm a Tar Heel. And then it comes to me, and everybody's like, who is this? What's going on?
He's got a Mr. Met on and Mr. Met hat on. And you think that's a Dare shirt. That's a Kendrick Lamar Damn shirt that GP's wearing right now, by the way. If you're listening and not watching, go find it. But yeah, in that exact garb. Yeah, just say it right now. Yeah. We'll cut it. We'll send it to you. Go ahead.
Cut it and send it. Okay, let me count me in.
I'll count you. Okay. No, actually, Nada, you count him in.
Nada, count me in.
Can I before I count you in, can I ask one question about this?
Please.
Weren't you the same guy that like last year was like do it for Terquavion?
Oh, yeah, he was. That's right.
And a Tar Heel at the same time.
I can. I'm not loyal. I'm not loyal in that way. I can be a Wolfpack 1 minute, a Sun Devil the next, a Boilermaker. I can just bounce wherever I need to bounce.
Sun Devil.
Yeah.
Look at me. I'm a Sun Devil.
I can't wait to be a Sun Devil again.
All right. Well, nevertheless, not a count him in.
Come in.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
I'm a Tar Heel. I didn't feel like I nailed that one. Let's do it again. Count me back in.
3, 2.
I was wrong. 1. I'm a Tar Heel. I don't feel like I'm nailing it. Give me one more time.
You don't have it.
Yeah, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not.
I think that's what we just learned.
Okay, give me one more shot at this.
3, 2, 1.
I'm Gary Parrish, and I'm a Tar Heel. How's that?
It's your best one yet, but no, it's not gonna happen there. But we have our first major subplot of the offseason on the pod with GP's rankings. 23 of them, by the way. 23. Will we get to someone that listens to the show? Find us the last show before the season starts. I'm setting the over-under. See, a lot of the transfer stuff is done. I'll set the over-under at 31.5 versions of the offseason top 25 at 1. Are you going over-under?
I'll go over, but it's gonna be around that. It's starting to slow down. Most of the things that could impact the rankings, which would be roster changes, most of that's done. Not all of it, obviously, but most of it.
31.5. I'm going to go. That's 8 more though. You know what? I'll go under. I want it for your sake. I want it under.
No,
I want it under for your sake. 23 on May 22nd. It's outrageous.
It is.
Any other notes on your rankings we should talk about?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? People are asking for a poll update. Nada, what is the response right now on this? Just we are buzzing on a Wednesday morning live show.
We are 6 to 10 is winning the poll at 43%. 10 to 15 is next with 29%. 16 or lower, 19%. 1 to 5, 10%.
Those people aren't Tar Heels. I'm a Tar Heel. I'm Gary Parrish, and I'm a Tar Heel.
I haven't broken down all the teams. I think I would have UNC anywhere between 4 and 8 right now, broadly speaking. I'd have them somewhere there. Definitely, unquestionably, top 10.
All right.
Couple things.
North Carolina, tweet him then. Tweet him. Tell him he's stupid.
Whatever. Come find me. Couple things before we get out of here. One, DMB starts its tour in Tampa. We're in the DMB shirt. Starts its tour tonight in Tampa. Have you ever been to Tampa, GP? Just out of curiosity.
Of course. You're talking to a former Conference USA beat writer.
That's true. Yeah, many trips to USF, right?
Yes, I've been to USF.
Okay, you've been to Tampa.
You think I've never been to Tampa with Seth Greenberg? You out of your mind?
with Seth Greenberg?
That was my era.
With Seth Greenberg. Okay.
Yeah, CUSA, buddy. We had Seth Greenberg, Bobby Lutz, Rick Pitino, Tom Crean, John Calipari, Bob Huggins, Dave Lato.
Brings me to my next question since you brought up Crean. Although maybe if we get a little slow, maybe we talk about this on another show. Fair or unfair that Tom Crean's been getting dragged for about the past 2 weeks because Anthony Edwards is awesome now and he was just, playing in obscurity while at Georgia.
I think all criticism of Tom Crean is unfair.
All criticism?
Yes. Every bit of it.
Everything ever?
Everything ever.
Wow.
This man did amazing things at Marquette. So amazing that he got the Indiana job. He won multiple outright Big Ten titles at Indiana. I don't know if you've noticed, but they don't do that anymore. All right. And then, the Georgia thing was a disaster. What do you mean to say? But like that man had an amazing career. I don't know that it's over either. But if he never coaches a Division I men's basketball game again, he's had a really nice career.
Nice career.
I'll fight somebody over Tom Crean.
That seems like you're going too far there. I think Tom Crean will coach again. It has been interesting to see people be like, dude, this guy played at Georgia, and we don't remember a thing about it. I can't find video of this. It is kind of fascinating. If we continue to be low on college hoops content, in fact, Eric Bossy of 247 had a story go up on Tuesday about where every player was ranked on the last 4 remaining playoff teams as a high school prospects. It's actually some interesting conversational fodder. Maybe we'll get into that on the next show. Lastly, before we went on the air here, our producer, Kanata Edwards, who was recently married, has decided where the honeymoon will be. So I want to see if we can guess it in 6 total guesses, you and me both. All right?
Okay.
I'll go first. Nada, when we do this, you got to say if you got to tell us if we got to go further west. You know, for example, I'm going to open with Hawaii. So you either got to determine whether we got to be moving further west, further east, or potentially south. Give us a certain direction before we go. So my first guess is Hawaii for your honeymoon. So is that right? East. Okay.
Southeast.
Southeast. I think everything's southeast from Hawaii. The whole
now,
world.
Australia is not southeast. Let's be
the
clear.
whole world is southeast from Hawaii. I think that's right, but
I think that's the North Pole.
I need to talk to Kyrie about this.
Yeah. Oh, God.
I need to talk to Kyrie. I'm going Turks and Caicos.
Okay.
West. It was one of the finalists.
Ooh. Okay. Little Turks and Cakes. I'm gonna say. Although I think this is south. I have been there. I'll say Aruba, but I think that's technically southwest.
It's southwest, yes, but you still need to go a little bit further west.
Ooh, further west of Aruba.
Further west of Aruba.
Can you picture where Aruba is, GP?
No.
It's a strong 3-wood from the top of South America. It's further south than you think it is.
How is Aruba not? Because like coincidentally, and hand to heart, this is true. My wife just sent me a link to some resort in Aruba for a possible trip. Is it nice like that? Is it nice like that?
Yes. I went to Aruba in 2007. I enjoyed it. I went with some buddies there. But yes, I'm sure it's gotten even nicer. There were certain spots that we were told to avoid, but I enjoyed it, and it was wild to fly in on Aruba because it's like flying over the ocean in the middle of nowhere, and then you see it, and then you're like, oh, are we actually gonna land on this thing? And ba-boom. Cool spot. I approve of Aruba.
Sounds just like LaGuardia.
Not quite.
No, I always have that exact same thought. I'm like, are we going to land in this place?
That's true. When you're coming in on LaGuardia, like, are we gonna get? And they do it.
Are we gonna make it?
They do it every time.
Are we
every
sure
time.
our wheels aren't going to hit this?
We're 3 in, by the way. So
I'm going with Cabo.
Close. North.
Hold on, I gotta bring
north of Cabo.
I gotta bring
and west of Turks and Caicos. This dude's going to Denver.
Hold on, he's not going to Denver.
He's going to Denver.
Hold on.
I think we've got this pinpointed down. I think he's going to Denver.
He's not going to Denver. All right, I'm looking at. Hold on. What you said? Close for Cabo. Hold on, I need a direction.
This fella here is going to Topeka.
I need a direction. Nada from Cabo.
Actually, it might be a little bit east. Little bit east.
East. So I think he's going to
Las Cruces,
Mexico. I think he's going to Mexico. If he says it's close, Guadalajara.
He's going to Guadalajara.
I would be divorced if I went to Guadalajara.
Dude, I tell you this, there's a little Mexican restaurant right by my house, Guadalajara Grill. I don't know if it's ever going to win a Michelin award, but man, they'll put some white cheese dip on a table.
Okay. Last guess is yours, GP. Is it Topeka? Is that the final guess?
I feel like
I guess it ain't Topeka.
Based on what I'm hearing, feels like this fella here is going to El Paso.
You're within about a 500-mile range.
500 miles.
Cancun, going to Cancun.
Yep.
Okay.
Playa Mujeres.
Via Mujeres?
Playa Mujeres. It's
Wow.
20 miles north. No, I'm sorry. It's 40 miles north of Cancun.
Oh yeah, then
Cancun
you're
is
going to
close
Cancun.
enough. Well, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I can't believe we didn't guess Cancun.
I did guess Cancun.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I'm looking where this thing is. I can't find it on the map here. Okay.
I like
All
Cancun.
right.
I've had great times in Cancun.
I have never been to. My wife's been to Cancun. I've never been to Cancun. Never been to Mexico. Never been to Mexico.
Oh man, I got Mexican blood running through my veins.
Do you though?
Yes. Yes, my ancestors are from Mexico.
What?
My mother's
Parrish?
my mother's maiden name is Cerros. Cerros. My grandfather was Antonio Cerros.
Doesn't feel like you're rolling your R properly. You might be a fraud.
True story. You ready for this? And then we can get out of here.
Sure.
First grade, kindergarten, something like that. It's Grandparents' Day. All right. Bring my grandfather, Granddaddy Cerros, to Grandparents' Day.
Yep.
And I mean, keep in mind, this dude had marimbas in his house. All right. I did the whole deal. And so the teacher says, Gary, you want to introduce your grandfather? I said, that's my Granddaddy Cerros. And she said, well, what do you want your grandfather to talk about? And I said, Granddaddy, why don't you tell him about when you lived in Mexico? He said, I never lived in Mexico. I said, what? What? And I said, well, just tell him about, when you went to Mexico. He said, I've never been to Mexico. I said, what? Your whole existence is a lie. Turns out I've been to Mexico more times than my grandfather, but his parents.
Sounds like you're not. Nope. Sounds like we got.
My granddad was from Southern California.
Yeah.
But his parents were from Mexico. And that's how I have Mexican blood running through my veins. But I've never been more disappointed in my grandfather in my life when I found out at the age of 7 or so. Not only was he not actually Mexican, like he's just as American as me. I grew up I spent the first 7 years of my life thinking I had a Mexican grandfather. And then turns out he's just as American as I am. That's a tough thing to.
And now you're you.
And now look.
And now
I'm a Tar Heel.
You're not a Tar Heel. We can get out of here. I got a quick question though, because I saw something yesterday and I was like, I'm going to bring this up on the pod. Are they selling Graceland? What's going on down there,
buddy? I don't know. It's there's an auction scheduled for 11 a.m. on Thursday on the steps of the court of the Shelby County Court building. All right, and it's like the report is that Lisa Marie, rest in peace. Rest in peace. Lisa Marie took out a $3.8 million loan and used Graceland as collateral. And
as one does.
And then she died. Rest in peace. And without ever paying it back, and nobody else knew nothing about nothing. And now Graceland's in foreclosure. All right. Riley Keough, who is the king, he's the king. She is the king's granddaughter. And now the sole owner of Graceland, she's saying it's all fraudulent, and they're all like literally doing court in 5 minutes. They're doing court in 5 minutes to try to hash all this out. I don't think you're gonna.
You can't sell Graceland,
but what if you could? Like, you know who I want to buy it? Gigi Jackson. I want Gigi Jackson to buy Graceland and move his whole family there.
Have you done a radio segment on this, or is this going to be a segment today?
Oh no, we did 20 minutes on it yesterday.
Oh, you did yesterday. Okay,
yeah.
I figured that might.
We got it narrowed down to either Gigi Jackson or Glorilla. Glorilla could buy it, and I might even put in a bid. I feel like I could get outbid by an NBA player, or Big Glow, but I would put in a bid, and I'd just move my family there. It's only like 10 minutes from. It's 20 minutes from where I live now, but you're just right up the road. It's conveniently located. That's the thing about Graceland; it's conveniently located. Okay. I wouldn't mind owning it myself.
Kevin B is on fire. We can get out of here, but he said he guessed that Nato was going to a Hornets game in Phoenix for his honeymoon, which is a great call. It's a great call. And then he said you guys took a shot at Mark Cohn for walking from Union Avenue to Graceland, and boom, it's sold. The curse of the podcast continues.
It's tough.
Fair?
It's tough.
Fair?
It's tough. That's tough. I don't think Graceland's actually going to be up for auction, but if it is, like, it's the most Memphis thing ever. We couldn't keep Graceland out of foreclosure. It's the most Memphis thing ever.
Oh my gosh, incredible, man.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
All right, let's get out of here.
Let's go.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Terry Teagle, he's a legend. Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for listening, watching the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe. Anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple and Spotify, more of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. So do that, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.